Well, hi, everyone. Welcome to the device segment. I'm super excited to be here with Lonny. He's the CEO of Pops. Lonny, thank you so much for being here. I really appreciate it.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate it too.
To give the audience a little bit perspective, again, why are we having this conversation? We looked at well over 500 different device companies globally. It was almost overwhelming. But one of the things that was one of the companies that really stood out to us was Pops. The stuff that they're doing, not only with how they're managing diabetes, but the platform and the solutions they're building on top of that is really impressive. So that's why I invited Lonny to talk with me today. Before we even get into questions, Lonny, I think it'd be great to give it back to you through introductions, visuals.
Wonderful, wonderful. So thank you very much. I appreciate it, Kyle. Yeah, my background is basically 30 years at Medtronic, one of the biggest medical device companies in the world, obviously. And I did a variety of things at Medtronic, but I chose to leave Medtronic 5 years ago for two reasons. One is I saw the consumerism of healthcare happening, people wanting to take healthcare in their own hands, using these really powerful computers that we're all carrying around, we like to call phones. And then I also saw me managing my own personal diabetes. So I have adult onset type 1 diabetes. I've had it for 20 years. For 15 years of managing my diabetes at Medtronic, my healthcare did not change at all. I had a test kit just like this one, standard of care across the world. And for me, that usually sat in my bathroom. And then when I was out living my life, I was on my own, and then I'd go see a doctor every 6 months. And I asked myself, how can it possibly be that we have this consumerism of healthcare happening, all this technology coming out, and this is the way I'm managing my diabetes, the most expensive chronic condition we have in the United States? So we started Pops to flip that model around and basically say, let's put the power in people's hands to manage their own healthcare using a technology platform, really the big picture of democratization of healthcare. And we've done that with Pops. So let me show you a couple slides and a demo of how Pops works. So Pops is about people owning their life and taking charge using a technology platform, just like we've seen in other industries. And the reason is because we need to look at diabetes from a different perspective. So much we say diabetes is really expensive. We need to manage these people closer. But the fact is 99.9% of the time, these people are out living their life and you can't manage them closer into compliance. They're not spending their time in the clinic and you can't get more and more people talking to them through telehealth visits or phone calls. And the primary tool that we're giving people is a test kit like I showed you that I left in my bathroom all the time when I was out living my life because it's just not convenient to carry around. So we make people choose. Live your life or manage your diabetes. With Pops, we're changing that choice. It's basically giving you a platform so you can live your life and manage your diabetes. That's through Mina, your AI virtual coach who's in your phone, paired along with the Revo meter. With these two, now I can completely manage my condition in my hands. Let me show you a live demo of how this works. So what you see next to me here now is a webcam. And that is a test kit, a very typical standard test kit across the world. And there's the comparison Rebel meter. There's three reasons people don't use these test kits. One is because they're too big to carry around. This is 20% the size of a typical test kit. Second reason is you have to pull it out. It's very conspicuous. It's very assemble oriented. People don't like to be that conspicuous about their diabetes. There's no assembly with the Rebel meter. It's very discreet. And the third reason is it hurts too much when people lance their finger. In this, although we're still getting a blood drop, 93% of people said this hurts much less than the traditional lancing tool. So let me show you a demo of that. If I want to check my blood sugar, I simply bring Mina into the picture, hit check, open the cover, which turns on the device and also creates a Bluetooth connection to Mina. A light comes on telling me to use the third of the 3 test strips that are here. That's the way I get my blood sample. And then I place that blood sample and close the cover. You saw how discreet that is and how easy it is. And I'm going to get a result on the phone. That's simple. I hit done. And now I have my blood sugar measurement. And then I can take that with the magnet we provide, and you basically have the solution right in your hand. So that's what Pops is in a nutshell. Hopefully it gives you a sense of kind of what we're doing and the differentiation we've created compared to everything else that's out there.
Really, really impressive how fast it is, how easy that is. The live demo that you shared is I mean, you have fantastic videos already online, and now being able to see that actually in person and how easy it was for your phone to pick up the information directly from the device. I'm blown away, actually. It's really
Yeah,
cool.
thank you. I appreciate that. It's you know, what it's got to be is about the experience of a person with diabetes, and that's what we haven't gotten for a long time. We just keep giving people the same old experiences, and we said no, let's change the experience, and that's what we've done.
Yeah. And you talked about your backstory about why you started this company. It was because you have diabetes and you were really frustrated with that traditional kit, and you made that jump. I mean, was there a big moment that happened that made you take that jump to start this company?
Well, it was a building moment. I wouldn't say it was a big moment. I'm a runner. I got frustrated by not being able to know my blood sugars when I was getting ready to do a race or something, because again, I wasn't going to have that kit with me. I tried wearing continuous glucose monitors, which people bring up regularly. Great technology for trending and so forth, but for me, it was just a hassle. I've actually worn two different ones, and I basically gave it up. And that is the challenge with CGM in general. You know, people always ask about that. Well, aren't there other things you can just wear? For a person to wear a device like that, now I have to accept that I must be a patient. Something's wrong with me. And it's this hassle factor of wearing something all the time. They're expensive and there's latency issues with them, et cetera. But, you know, so that's why the majority of people are still using those test kits. And for me, I was just like, this can't be the best we can do.
Mm. No, it makes sense. And you kind of highlighted what I wanted to ask in the next question, which is, it seems like when we look at especially glucose meters, there's a lot of different form factors and a couple different routes you can go. I'm just curious why you chose this route specifically, and the device that you've built, how it's easily connects with the phone, you know, is be able to with the magnetic, be able to connect with the phone. What was the background behind this?
Yeah, so one of the things that I saw as an engineer by background and working in the med tech industry was, and a person with diabetes that wanted this problem solved, is I saw all these cool ideas coming around, you know, and you'd see a publication about, oh, they're going to measure blood sugar with the contact lens, or they're going to measure blood sugar, you know, with a wristwatch and things like that. But none of them ever happened. And the reason they don't happen is because that's a really, really difficult problem. And to get that accuracy that the FDA requires, et cetera, with those types of alternate solutions, they work great on an N of one in a lab, but they don't work for the large population. And so we started out and we said, we're not going to try to pursue a whole different way. The gold standard for measuring blood sugar is to get a drop of blood and measure it. So let's instead change the experience of that test kit. And so we went and asked people in focus groups, why don't you use your test kit? And you know, we literally talked to hundreds of people. And the three reasons I gave you earlier, the size, the conspicuousness, and the pain, that was the three reasons. And we basically said, okay, let's take those three reasons away. So that's the reason we did that. And then to have it connected to the phone, because again, I believe in consumerism of healthcare, you know, digital health and digital therapeutics. I knew that was going to be the future. And so combining those two things together to me was the key.
Awesome. And I'm curious, when you on your device, you slid back the panel, and it looked like there was 3 slots or 3 Lancets. Is that something you have to replace every time, or how many times, maybe even take even bigger step back for people without diabetes, you know, how often are you taking samples? And, you know, are there additional tools or things that they have to buy in addition to this advice?
Yeah, great question. So for the majority of people with diabetes that are just on like an oral drug, the ADA recommendation is to test 1 time a day, and typically that might work. Maybe a couple times a day, morning and night. For people on insulin, which are about 35% of people with diabetes, you should be, by ADA recommendations, testing at least 3 times a day, and often your physicians will tell you 4 or 5 times a day. So that gives you a sense of kind of the realm of, you know, kind of where people are testing. And so with the current kit, every time you theoretically are supposed to change your lancet and the lancing tool, and then also change and put a new test strip into the meter, and then you have to dispose of those when you're done. With our device, there is no changing of individual lancets or individual test strips. After I test 3 times, then I simply slip out this module that's got 3 integrated tests into it, new lancet and new test strip each time, and I grab a new one and I plug it in. So it's really that easy to do, and I don't have to do any assembly of small parts and so forth. And importantly, as I mentioned, from a discreteness perspective, I can do that when I want to, right? I don't have to do that every time I check my blood sugar.
Interesting. Yeah, I think that was one of the things that you also highlighted quite a bit is the ability for users not to have to assemble meters every time they take a test. And I think that kind of highlights your focus of, you know, consumerizing the experience of healthcare and managing their diabetes.
Yeah, absolutely. I always say that our core competency is creating the experience that people want. Because if you get the experience right, then I believe healthcare gets better. That's
Yeah.
what I think we have not always thought about so much in healthcare. We've thought about it more in terms of efficacy and clinical data and all the other things. And as this consumerism of healthcare happens, we need to always start thinking about it from the person eyes, a consumer's eyes.
Yeah. And you actually kind of already answered this question as well, talking about the different methods of measuring glucose within your blood. But I wanted, for the audience, I really want to highlight this important aspect. You guys are FDA approved in the process in your approach of taking blood to measure glucose. And you talked about how that's a gold standard. Can you just reaffirm why this is important versus everything else that we see and the noise and the volume in this space?
Yeah, and so one of the things that we were not scared of because of our backgrounds in Medical Alley in Minneapolis here, a lot of consultants and a lot of expertise around this area is getting FDA clearance of a new product. One of the reasons that you see so many of these test kits out there with different names on them is because they don't have to necessarily go get FDA clearance if all they're doing is kind of changing the name on the same old kit. And so we wanted to change that experience, which means we needed FDA clearance. The FDA process is a very critical and stringent process around accuracy most often. We had to do a large 350-person clinical study around accuracy to be able to get the FDA clearance. And usability, that's another thing the FDA focuses on in that study, as well as all the different reviews they do around your development process and security and all the other things that the FDA gives us. And so that is a really important process. And it's the reason, again, a lot of these other kind of ideas have not become really marketable, on the market items because they don't have FDA clearance. We also have CE mark, which is the registration or the regulation outside the United States that's key. So we've been through both of those processes.
Interesting. Well, it's not only your device that's impressive. It's simple, easy to use, straightforward, really, pretty small. You easily take with you wherever you want to go. But why we thought and included you as a part of what we think is one of the best device companies globally is because it's not just the device. You are building a workflow, a health management tool on top of that. And it's pretty unique. I'm curious, can you talk to us a little bit more about this application that you built that connects with the device and what it does and why it's important?
Yep. So it is about creating a platform that enables people to own their condition. You can't just kind of do one piece or the other. And I think that's another thing that we've seen in healthcare is people make really cool apps, but then they're still doing a device like this. And then you don't have the device with you. So what does the app really do for you? By combining the experience together in one hand where you got the very convenient device, and then we add Mina, your AI virtual coach. Now, in between those physician visits, where you're ever maybe going every 6 months or every 12 months to the physician, now Mina is there to help you also, right? To be that companion with you as long as you have your phone. And we know you always have your phone with you, right? So, and Mina's really focused on two things. So she's focused on behavior modification and engagement. So she's not being a medical practitioner. The behavior modification is around the things you should be doing to manage your diabetes. And so Mina will ask me on a regular basis, hey, Lonny, are you checking your feet? Are you exercising? Are you getting your eyes professionally checked, which is one of the key things that people with diabetes need to do. But then also keeping me engaged and reminding me about my diabetes management, things like I just mentioned. The example I use all the time that kind of bridges both engagement and behavior modification is I set a blood sugar goal for myself, not going too low or not too high when I take a measurement off the Rebel meter. And if I'm out of that goal too much, Mina knows I'm going to get disengaged because nobody wants to try to do something over and over and keep failing. And so Mina says, hey, Lonny, it looks like you're struggling with your goal. Let's open it up by 10% or whatever number she thinks is right for me. And then if I say, okay, then she starts saying, great job, you're killing it. I earn points in the gamification piece of it. I'm being engaged in what I'm doing. And then she says, hey, Lonny, you're killing it. Let's tighten up your goal by 3% or whatever number is right for me. And she looks at how motivated I am to manage my diabetes and addresses me appropriately based on that. So then over time, I get tighter and tighter control through Mina working with me on a regular basis, rather than just waiting for an appointment every 6 months at a clinic to go through those same things. And so in this way, Mina is helping you along with that simple measurement to get better control of your diabetes.
Interesting. Really interesting. And it's impressive to see how you've been able to really personalize this experience to each individual. I mean, how is that even possible? How do you personalize and have this AI coach be able to help each individual with very specific goals for their, their condition, whichever phase they are in diabetes?
Yeah, so one of the key things we look at is your motivation to manage your diabetes. So one of the things that we found when we did focus groups around the start of our company is we literally talked to hundreds of people. And one of the most amazing things we found, we actually published it at the American Diabetes Association one year, was 90% of people said they wanted to use an app to manage their diabetes, but only 10% were actually doing it. And we're like, how can this be? 90%, but only 10% are doing it. And then when you start to ask the questions why that's true, what you find out is the apps are too much burden. And so we kind of created this mantra for ourselves, more benefit than burden. So what Mina doesn't do is make you enter all this information and do different things to you and continually ping you and so forth. But she does look at how motivated you are. And if you are motivated, she's going to push on you harder and remind you of more things and challenge you more in terms of your goals. If you're less motivated, she's going to do that less. And in that way, Mina's not just an app, and an app that works the same for you as it does for me. It becomes your companion in helping you manage your diabetes.
Interesting. Really interesting. Coming from a user, I mean yourself, and as someone who actively tries to monitor their diabetes, for your solution, whether it's the application or even the device, what are the features that tend to resonate the most with individuals like yourself?
Yeah, so right now I would say that the thing that is so different compared to everything else that's out there is the device versus wearing a CGM or using a test kit. For me personally, I know that is what is the biggest differentiator, and we hear that feedback from people. It's just so easy. I don't feel it, things like that. But I think Mina's getting jealous about that, and so we do have things that are happening with Mina to create some unique features that maybe she'll challenge the Rebel meter a little bit in terms of what people like the most. So that's coming. Interesting.
Well, and I could imagine going from a huge bulky kit now to just a super simple device to use. I mean, that's light years of a difference. And you already mentioned why this is important, but for some reason we kind of see this still today where, why didn't you just focus on just Mina, the software? Why didn't you just focus and stay with the device? Why did you want to why was it important for you to do both?
Yeah, so for me, going back to like when I started thinking about consumer health and even before I left my previous job and so forth, this is one of the keys that I think is key to our future of consumer health, digital therapeutics, whatever word you want to use, is we need to think about a whole consumer experience to make it an easy experience for people. If you are an expert in how to write an app and you can make a better app than we even have, great. But if you tie that with sensors that people aren't going to use while they're living their life, then what did that app really do for you? And likewise, vice versa, if you create a great device, that might be good, but it can be even better if you tie that into kind of things like what we're doing with Mina. And so to me, it was always fundamental and foundational that you combine the experience together and make the whole experience one easy to use experience.
Interesting. Yeah, it makes sense. I'm kind of curious. I mean, you do have FDA approval for the device, and this probably washes out this question in general, but for most solutions that help individuals manage their health, are there any risks or limitations that your users might have with managing their devices or managing their own health using your platform? And, is there anything that they should be concerned about, making a transition to a great and unique tool that makes things much, much easier. Is there any type of risk associated with that?
So there's no real healthcare risk in the element of kind of how you're bringing it up around FDA and so forth. This is proven in clinical trials. This is proven through the FDA, clearance that says, hey, this should be safe and effective to use. So we don't see any healthcare risks like that. And we've used it with enough people now that we are definitely not concerned about that. To me, what this is going to be about is, this experience may not, if there was a risk, I would say the risk is this experience may not be the experience everybody wants, right? I mean, some people don't want Mina, to be your companion and so forth. And we don't offer it a la carte, right? So by creating one experience, we think we're benefiting the majority of the people that might be able to utilize this. But, there's a risk, I guess, to us, not necessarily to the individuals, that this isn't the experience they want. And so then they disengage. And so that would be the biggest risk from an individual perspective.
Gotcha. And it makes sense. And the reality is with your platform, with your health management tool, with Mina, et cetera, it's almost light years better than what you talked about the original kit was, which is, static information, not necessarily being able to track it over time, not reminding you to track things. I mean, it's a huge improvement. I think even providers would really appreciate. I'm curious, though, that it seems like the approach for you is actually going more direct to consumer or even through employers. So can you highlight a little bit, give just background in this and why that might be your approach?
Yeah, so our business model is actually a subscription model, either directly to employers to offer to their participants or to health plans to offer out to their commercial clients. So we're not actually going direct to consumer. We thought it was important to build a consumer experience because we want people to use it and be compliant around it. But we actually market as a subscription service out to these employers and health plans. So that was actually one of the keys for me, as we were creating this, because I knew that the traditional glucose management market was making money around selling individual test strips. Well, we didn't want to sell test strips. We don't even have test strips as individual, things in our device. And so we needed to have an alternative business model. And the good news is in the last 5 years, this kind of subscription model to health plans and or employers has kind of been emerged as a digital health model and has been proven out. And so that's good. So we're in a way a fast follower into some people that have already kind of gone out and piloted that model. And we think we have a better solution than any of them do. And so that's good for us. And so that's what the model really is about getting a contract in place with an employer or health plan, and then helping them market out to the individuals. This is an experience you are going to enjoy. And then that's where it becomes that kind of direct to consumer messaging.
Interesting. Okay. And that makes sense. And it definitely feels as though that the experience you do build is very personal, very consumer centric. And so it's really awesome. Do you actually find it difficult to sell directly to payers or employers? I mean, healthcare has long sales cycles. It's really difficult to talk to get it first, especially for the device category, the first name with anybody. How did you manage this?
Yeah, so one of the things we found is when we get in front of the right decision maker, so that's the first part of the cycle, is people see our difference and really understand it, just as you are. Wow, this is different than everybody else is offering. And so that's really good. And we can win business because of that. When we get in front of the decision maker, we win business. But to your point, the contracting process is long with health plans, et cetera. One of the ways that we started to enter the market is we said, we need fast decisions because we don't want to wait, a year or 2 years for everybody. And so what we decided to do first is go directly after mid-market employers. So mid-market employers are fast decision makers, and they don't have the kind of long healthcare kind of sales cycle that you're speaking to. So that was our first clients. And with that, we got traction. And then those employers introduce us into their health plans and say, why don't you guys offer POPs? And then that opens the door to the decision makers in the health plans. And then we start that process. And so while the process has been longer than any of us would like it, the process to get on health plan contracts does work. We have done it successfully, and we are contracted with health plans today. We will continue to go both to employers and to health plans, kind of depending on what it works. But we know the more scalable way is to get more health plans signed up.
Interesting. I guess for a handful of people, it might be obvious how big of the problem this is, but for a lot of people looking at the device category, there's lots of different specific devices for specific things. Can you give us just a general sense of how big of a problem diabetes is, at least monitoring it, just so that the audience has a perspective?
Absolutely. Yeah. So just to, go from biggest down to more total accessible market. So in the US, there's over 400 million people with diabetes. If I just bring that to in the world, there's 400 million people. If I just bring that to the US, that's about 34 million people with diabetes. Now we're going after that self-insured market, which throws out retirees and other, folks like that on Medicare, et cetera. And so that brings that group down to around 10 to 12 million people with diabetes that are being covered by these self-insured plans. And if you take that 10 or 12 million people, that is a $5 billion market just in the monitoring market, not including all the insulin and everything else. So it's a huge market opportunity. And importantly, when you look at it from the economic eyes of the health plans or for the employers, they're spending on each one of those people 4 times more than a person without diabetes, about annually $16,000 for a person with diabetes, all their healthcare claims. And that number is 4 times higher than a person without diabetes, not just because diabetes is expensive, but it's because of poorly controlled diabetes. That's what causes things like extra neuropathy drugs and extra eye drugs and ER visits, et cetera. And if we can give people, individuals, the experience to manage their diabetes better, that's how you bring that economic cost down for the employers and for the health plan.
Interesting. I never, it definitely makes sense where the majority of the costs actually come from the issues of just trying to figure out how to manage your diabetes. I'm curious, how has the pandemic affected your company, and has it?
Yeah, so from a big global scale, and the good news is I think digital health is kind of out of the bag and it's not going to go back in the bag, so I think this has been on the big scale a good thing, that people realize we need to offer these types of digital health solutions, put healthcare into people's hands. Unfortunately, I'm on an American Diabetes Association board, and we hear data about all these people with diabetes that are not going to the clinic. They're not managing their diabetes. Even people that should be starting to take insulin based on data, there's less people starting to take insulin and other drugs today than there was a year ago. Well, that's not because we all of a sudden don't have diabetes anymore. It's because people aren't getting diagnosed and they're not actually managing their diabetes correctly anymore. And so what we need to do is put in the hands of people technology like this, these digital health solutions. And that's what COVID, I think, has really kind of emphasized and amplified in the last 6 months. Of course, like everybody, there was a period of time where, employers and everybody else didn't want to talk about anything new, right? So our new conversations, they weren't, happening for 3 or 4 months, but that's turned around now as people are getting ready for 2021 and renewal season is upon us and so forth. So I think digital health is going to flourish in the upcoming years.
Interesting. And it seems as though, especially those that have diabetes would be a higher risk class for COVID than a traditional user. So having a digital experience and being able to manage your diabetes from home would be really, really important, and especially in this setting.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, unfortunately, not necessarily people with diabetes, but people with poorly controlled diabetes are at higher risk. And those people, just give you a sense, this data is a little bit dated now, but a couple months ago, if you looked at the number of people in the ICU, there's 4 times the average of people with diabetes in the general population in the ICU, which just kind of gives one signal of how people with diabetes are being hit by this harder. And again, it's not because they have diabetes, it's because their diabetes is not controlled. If you control your diabetes, your immune system works. And that's what we want people to know and get by using something like this. Interesting.
I didn't know that. That's really interesting to in fact, to take away, I think, from this. I'm curious, and you may have already kind of answered this in a couple different ways earlier, but what do you think is the future of, health management or devices, especially within your category? And what do you see that most people don't?
So in 3 words, the democratization of healthcare. Just like we've seen in the banking industry, where people don't go to a bank regularly anymore, they bank through their phone. Or in the travel agent, the travel industry, where maybe you used to go to a travel agent or into a ticket counter or something, and today nobody even thinks about that. You do it all through your phone. You book your ticket, you book your card, you book your place you're going to stay, all through your phone, and that's the way you travel. The same thing has to happen in healthcare. It's inevitable. It's going to come back out to individuals like us taking control of our own healthcare using technology platforms. And things like what we're doing or other digital health companies are doing are just going to keep pushing it that more and more direction. There will never be a time where we replace clinics totally or replace physicians totally. Don't get me wrong. But for the routine things that people should be doing self-management with anyway, those are the things where essentially the patients of today are going to be the physicians of tomorrow using technology. And I think that's really the way we need to start thinking about healthcare.
Awesome. Wonderful. I mean, Lonny, this was fantastic. I really appreciate you taking the time to answer questions. I mean, this was showing us a live demo and how simple that is just blows my mind. And as well as the uniqueness of Mina and the platform as well, and highlighting the importance of this ecosystem and how you've made a difference. I mean, it's really impressive. Before I close out, Lonny, did you have any other things that you want to close on, ask the audience, anything?
Yeah, I would basically emphasize that, hopefully it's come across in here, but there is nothing else like this on the market today in managing diabetes. And whether it's a partner or whether it's an investment opportunity, we would like to get in front of those right people, those decision makers, because then they will see this is, what is the future of healthcare. And we are both raising a $2 million bridge round right now, as well as talking to commercial partners all the time. And we would love to have that opportunity.
Awesome. Well, thank you, Lonny. And again, for perspective of the audience, I mean, this is what we think one of the best companies within the healthcare device category overall. And that's a lot. It's a lot of companies to go through. And Lonny, it's really impressive what you built. And we agree, 100% agree, which is why we wanted to do this interview, which is why we wanted to highlight you, is because what you're doing, and especially within your space, is a lot of years ahead of what everybody else is doing, and really impressive in comparison to just other device companies as well. So it's been an absolute pleasure. I really appreciate you taking the time. This was really great. So thank you, Lonny.
Yeah, thank you. The pleasure is mine, Kyle. Thank you for doing this. I think this is great that you're making the highlights, and I appreciated being able to do it.